Millions across the United States will buy tickets, pack their things, and then board an airplane next week. Thanksgiving brings friends and family from afar together. It is also the busiest week of travel in the U.S. all year. And despite the recent disruption to air travel thanks to the government shutdown, the American Automobile Association says more than 6 million Americans will fly during Thanksgiving week. Now, for many, the flights are just a means to an end. The queuing, waiting, and sitting next to a total stranger, it's not something that we tend to enjoy. The U.S. Department of Transportation says it's an experience that increasingly brings out the very worst in people, and it is appealing to travelers to pack some patience and kindness.
Come fly with me, let's fly away.
Air travel is a miracle of American ingenuity. We built airports to launch a golden age of travel across the skies. We respected the dignity of air travel and the men and women who made the dream possible. Flying was a bastion of civility, but today, but manners don't stop at the gate.
That's right. Manners don't stop at the gate. Things aren't what they used to be. Some would call it the golden age of travel. Let's bring civility and manners back.
Yeah, pack your manners. Now, that was a campaign video from the U.S. Department of Transportation appealing to passengers to bring courtesy and class back to the skies. With Thanksgiving just days away, worries over a wave of public freakouts, meltdowns, and other moments of madness, they're gaining altitude. In the 60s and 70s, it truly was about flying the friendly skies, the excitement, the anticipation, the chats with your in-flight neighbor. Well, now flying is seen as a chore, an unpleasant experience that we have to get through to share some quality time with family and friends. If you also feel that other passengers might be a little more irritable today than in the past, well, you're not imagining things. According to the Federal Aviation Administration, the number of in-flight outbursts, anything ranging from disruptive behavior to outright violence, has increased by 400% since 2019. Since 2021, nearly 14,000 incidents involving unruly passenger behavior have been reported. And compared to 2019, last year saw double the number of incidents involving unruly passengers. People misbehaving. All right, let's pull in Sheryl Skaggs now. She's a professor of sociology and public health at the University of Texas at Dallas. She has studied in-flight incidents over 21 years. You've got a lot to study, I have to say that. When you watch that footage from the golden age of air travel, side by side with footage from today, I mean, the difference is startling. Why are increasing numbers of passengers losing their minds mid-air?
I think there are a couple of, thank you for having me, but I think there are a couple of important reasons why we're seeing this. One is that we saw this incredible surge during the pandemic and right after the pandemic. So people were already on edge, just in general, and I think, flying intensified that. We've also seen a lot more people traveling now than what used to travel. Mm-hmm. So we see people from all walks of life traveling now, and there's certainly an apparent inequality, I think, when we look at flyers now compared to before. And people just have shorter fuses. I think, as your data points to that, there is a lack of civility just in general. And I think this, when we're confined to small spaces like this, it just intensifies the effect.
What do you mean when you say there's the inequality? Are you talking about the difference between economy and business, or what do you mean there?
Definitely. Mm-hmm. So flying's more accessible to people across the socioeconomic spectrum. And so, in earlier eras, we saw a lot more elites or high-income passengers, and now we see passengers from all walks of life. Mm-hmm. And that also means that they're noticing these differences. So especially when passengers walk through first class when they're getting to their seats in the back of the plane and they see the differences in terms of the spaces. You can also
Yeah.
see this with differences in business class versus economy class.
Yeah. I mean, I know the feeling, how good it feels if you get an upgrade into business for sure. Let me, let me ask you
Exactly.
about what people do sometimes. I was talking about this with my producer. I mean, people take medication or they drink alcohol before a flight to help them get through the whole experience. Is that contributing to this rise in unruly passengers?
Without a doubt. More and more people, I think, I think we're certainly aware of mental health more than we have been in the past, but I think more people are suffering from issues of high levels of anxiety. And so they treat that with things like medication and alcohol, and they tend to mix often the medication and the alcohol to try to create a better environment for themselves. But in fact, that just tends to make them more on edge. So then that leaves other passengers dealing with their high levels of anxiety and alcohol consumption, as well as the flight crew.
And what about just the way we are wired? I mean, we are animals that are hardwired to take flight or fight when we perceive a threat. But when you're in an airplane, there's nowhere to run. Is that also a contributing factor?
Oh, for sure. In normal public spaces, even we have the ability to spread apart, and even when we're sandwiched in a number of different instances in public spaces, we still have the option to walk out and leave. And we don't necessarily have that option. It's very cramped quarters. And I will say, even from my own experience, the data also supports this, that flights are very full now. I can recall a period when I would fly many years ago and, you may have an entire row to yourself. That's a rarity and a treat, for most people. So I think that also contributes to it, because you can't really escape all of the other people in that very confined space.
I've spent about half of my life flying across the Atlantic, and I've noticed unruly passengers are definitely more, you see them more in the U.S., less so here in Europe. And I wonder, does that have something to do with the fact that in the EU, you have a passenger bill of rights? You know that the airlines, they can't treat you badly without being penalized for it. In the U.S., you really don't have that. Is that also part of the reason why people seem to be miffed all the time when they go to the airport?
I think there is that, missing component. I think airline crew members are under a lot of pressure to present themselves in a certain way, to board the plane, to do all of these things, organizationally or structurally. And then they're dealing with passengers that are annoyed. So I think, often you'll get on a flight and the flight crew's already annoyed. So that doesn't help the experience at all, as opposed to, having those experiences where, they're excited to see you, and, it's a very positive experience. And I think that's been taken away. Some of it's also just about the general experience of, TSA and some of the processing that happens, and people become annoyed at that stage, and then that carries over and spreads over into their flight experience.
Do you think, we're running out of time, we've got about 30 seconds. Let me just ask you, do you think if there were fewer smartphones and cameras on airlines, would we behave better if we weren't being videotaped, or the other way around? What do you think?
I think that's only escalated. Some people would say that's a bit of policing, and so it should curb the behavior, but I don't think it curbs the behavior much at all. In fact, I think it makes for an experience that might be unpleasant to intensify on an aircraft. So that somebody's capturing you on a camera. So I think if we weren't allowed to do that sort of behavior, then I think we would see a lot fewer of these kinds of highly escalated situations.
Well, Sheryl, we appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. If you're flying this Thanksgiving, as I am, I wish you a very peaceful and a boring flight. All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you for taking the time to talk with us.